The white hospital walls had been weighing on me for 3 days straight. The smell of antiseptic had become ingrained in my nostrils, and the endless beeping of the machines had merged into a monotonous melody that was starting to give me a headache. At 74 years old, this was the first time I had been in the hospital for so long. Even when I gave birth to Wilbur and Celeste, I was discharged on the 3rd day, and now I'm lying here with pneumonia, which crept up on me unnoticed. First a cold, then a cough, and then a fever that almost made me lose consciousness. I guess this damn year is to blame for everything. A year without Randall. My Randall left so suddenly. A heart attack while fishing on our lake. 48 years together, and then nothing. The doctors say my immune system is weakened from stress and grief. Maybe they're right. I adjusted the thin hospital blanket and tried to get comfortable. It was a double room, but the other bed was empty. Morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, leaving blurry sunspots on the floor. "Mrs. Farrell, how are you feeling today?" Nurse Janet entered the room, a young woman with kind eyes and bright red hair pulled back into a tight bun. "How can an old woman with pneumonia feel?" I grumbled, but immediately softened. "I'm sorry, dear. I think I'm a little better. At least it's easier to breathe." Janet checked the IV, took my blood pressure and temperature, and made notes on her tablet. 37.2. "That's better," she smiled. "Dr. Taggart will see you after his rounds. Your son called and said he'd be here after noon." I nodded and turned away to the window. Wilbur had started visiting me frequently after my father's death. Too frequently. When Randall was alive, he would show up at our lake house maybe once a month, and then mostly to ask for money. Now he had suddenly become a caring son, especially after he found out that the house was paid off and had been left to me. I closed my eyes, remembering our last conversation with Randall a week before his death. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset over the lake. The water reflected the pink sky, making it feel like we were floating among the clouds. "Agatha," Randall said, sipping his evening tea, "I want you to be careful with Wilbur after, well, you know." "After what?" I didn't understand. "After I'm gone," he replied calmly, staring at the water. "Don't look at me like that. We both know I'm 4 years older than you, and my heart isn't what it used to be. I've seen the way he looks at the house, the way he weighs every conversation we have about the future." "Stop it, Randall," I dismissed him then. "He's just worried about us." "He's worried about the house, Agatha, and the money. I saw his credit letters in the mailbox when he was here last time. He's up to his ears in debt." I didn't believe my husband, or didn't want to believe him. A mother always sees the best in her children, even when all the facts point to the contrary. And now, lying in my hospital room, I remembered those words and thought that maybe Randall was right. After lunch, Octavia, my only granddaughter, came to visit me. At 17, she was strikingly mature and serious, tall with shoulder-length brown hair and attentive brown eyes so similar to Randall's. "Hi, Grandma." She kissed me on the cheek and placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the nightstand. "How are you?" "Better than yesterday," I smiled, glad she had come. "How's school?" "Same as always." She sat down on the edge of the bed and took my hand. "I brought your book, the one you asked for." She took a worn copy of Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile, my favorite book, out of her backpack. Randall always teased me about my love of detective stories and the fact that I was named after the famous author. "Thank you, sweetie." I squeezed her hand. "How's your father?" Octavia frowned slightly. "He's nervous. He's on the phone all the time, whispering. Mom says he's having problems at work, but—" She fell silent. "But what?" "I heard him talking to a man about selling a property by the lake. I think he's looking for a buyer for the house next door to yours." I nodded, but something inside me was alarmed. There was no real estate for sale in our neighborhood. Our closest neighbors, the Veskits, had lived there for almost 40 years, and Marion had never mentioned any plans to move. Octavia and I talked for about another hour. She told me about school and her plans to apply to college next year to study marine biology. I listened, proud of her determination. She had always been a smart girl. After my granddaughter left, I tried to read, but the words blurred before my eyes. The fatigue and medication were taking their toll. I dozed off and woke up to voices behind the screen, separating my bed from the door. "Dr. Taggart, I understand you're doing everything you can, but she's improving too slowly. It was Wilbur's voice, muffled but insistent. Maybe we should step up the treatment? Mr. Farrell, your mother is recovering at a normal rate for her age, the doctor replied. Pneumonia in elderly people doesn't go away in a couple of days. I'm just worried. She looks so weak. That's natural after losing her husband and considering her age. Can't you give her something stronger? Wilbur insisted. I've read about new drugs. Give her a stronger dose, I heard my son say to the doctor, and a chill ran down my spine. I saw in her chart that the antibiotic dosage is at the lower limit. Mr. Farrell, Dr. Taggart's voice became stern. I understand your concern, but I can't increase the dose without medical justification. An increased dose of antibiotics could negatively affect your mother's kidneys, and at her age, that's highly undesirable. But if it will help her recover faster, it could cause complications that would only worsen her condition. I see no reason to change the current treatment regimen. There was a pause. I lay still, pretending to be asleep, but inside I was trembling. Why was Wilbur insisting on increasing my medication, and how did he know what was in my medical records? All right, doctor, Wilbur finally said, and I heard poorly concealed irritation in his voice. I trust your judgment. When can she be discharged? Not for at least a week, assuming there is positive progress. That long? I thought I'd be able to take her home in the next few days. I have plans. What plans could be more important than your mother's health? Dr. Taggart's voice was clearly disapproving. No, you misunderstand. Wilbur quickly corrected himself. I just took time off work to take care of her, and it's limited. We can arrange for a visiting nurse if you can't. That won't be necessary. I'll take care of my mother myself. I heard them move away from my bed, and their voices became indistinguishable. Opening my eyes, I stared at the ceiling. Something about that conversation deeply disturbed me. Give her a stronger dose. Those words didn't sound like the request of a caring son, but like, what? Like a demand? Like part of some plan? I remembered Randall's words about Wilbur being interested in our house, about his debts, about the plans he had just mentioned. Nurse Janet brought me dinner, tasteless hospital gruel and fruit compote. I asked her to get my purse from the nightstand. Janet, tell me, I said, taking out a small mirror. Who has access to my medical records? Only the attending staff, Mrs. Farrell, she replied, raising her eyebrows in surprise. Why? No reason. I thought my son mentioned some details about my treatment. Dr. Taggart may have discussed your therapy with him in general terms, but we don't show patient records to relatives unless absolutely necessary. I nodded and thanked her. When she left, I opened the mirror and looked at my reflection. A pale face with wrinkles, gray hair, tired eyes. But there was something new in those eyes. Alertness. The office administrator in me had awakened after a long sleep. I had worked at Northern Life Insurance Company for 32 years, rising from secretary to chief office administrator. I had seen people try to cheat the system, forge documents, and hide information. I learned to spot inconsistencies, document every detail, and piece together a chronology of events. These skills saved the company from fraudsters more than once. And now, 7 years after retiring, those skills could come in handy for me, because Wilbur's words wouldn't leave me alone, because the look he gave me when he thought I wasn't looking was judgmental, as if I wasn't his mother, but an obstacle. In the evening, he came to see me after all. He sat down on a chair next to the bed and smiled his broad smile that never reached his eyes. "How are you, Mom?" he asked, adjusting the collar of his expensive shirt, a shirt that cost more than he could afford on his salary as a pest control inspector. "Better," I replied, watching him closely. "The doctor says I'm on the mend." "That's wonderful." He took a small bottle out of his pocket and placed it on the nightstand. "I brought you some vitamins. Fletcher at the pharmacy said they'll help you recover faster." I looked at the bottle. There was no pharmaceutical company label, just a small sticker that read, "Vitamins for Agatha Farrell," and the recommended dosage, 2 capsules before bedtime. "Thank you," I said, not touching the bottle. "I'll ask Dr. Taggart if I can take them with my prescribed medication." Wilbur's face froze for a moment, then he smiled even wider. Sure, ask him. But they're just vitamins, Mom, nothing special. I'll ask anyway. You know I've always been careful with medication. He nodded and changed the subject, talking about his work, how Paige said hello and would definitely visit on the weekend. I listened half-heartedly, noticing how he glanced at the bottle of vitamins from time to time, as if expecting me to decide to take them after all. When he left, I asked Nurse Janet to put the bottle in the nightstand, saying I would consult with the doctor first. As soon as the door closed behind her, I took out the small notebook and pen I always carried with me, an old habit from my office days. On the first page, I wrote the date and time, then summarized the events of the day. Wilbur's conversation with the doctor, his insistent request to increase his medication, the unlabeled vitamins, his plans to take me home as soon as possible. At the bottom of the page, I added, "Check what vitamins are in the bottle. Ask Marion if Wilbur has talked to her about selling the house." Closing the notebook, I hid it back in my purse. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Wilbur was just worried about me. But Randall's words, my son's strange behavior, and my own experience told me otherwise. I didn't know what Wilbur was up to, but I was sure he was hiding something. And that something had to do with our house on the lake. The house where Randall and I had lived for almost 30 years, raised our children, and grown old. The house that seemed to be nothing more than a valuable asset to Wilbur. Looking out the window at the darkening sky, I remembered something else from that conversation with Randall on the porch. "Agatha," he said then, finishing his tea, "I made some changes to my will last week, just in case." "What changes?" I asked. "You'll find out when the time comes. Just remember, all that glitters is not gold, and not every son cares for his mother selflessly." At the time, I dismissed his words as the ramblings of an old man. Now, lying in a hospital room with pneumonia, I thought that maybe my Randall was wiser than I had given him credit for, and that those changes to his will might be more important than they seemed. I closed my eyes, feeling waves of fatigue wash over me. Tomorrow I would start figuring out what was going on, because if Wilbur really was up to something, if his concern was calculated, well, he doesn't know what his mother is capable of when she feels threatened. 32 years in an insurance company taught me not only how to keep records, but also how to protect what is dear to me. And now I needed to get well, because I didn't know that he didn't know that I had hurt him, and that was my only advantage. 3 days in the hospital turned into a week. My condition was improving, but slower than the doctors had expected. I was still coughing at night, and in the morning I felt inexplicably weak. What was particularly strange was that this weakness intensified after Wilbur's visits. That morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Nurse Janet was changing my IV and writing something on her tablet. "Good morning, Mrs. Farrell," she smiled. "How did you sleep?" "So-so," I admitted, propping myself up on the pillow. "Janet, could you do something strange for me?" She put down her tablet. "Of course, if it's within my power." "I need a copy of the list of medications I'm prescribed, with the dosages, and I'd also like to know when and what tests are being done on me." Janet raised her eyebrows in surprise. "That's an unusual request, but there's nothing confidential about it. You have a right to know about your treatment," she said thoughtfully. "I can print out your prescription sheet. As for the tests, they're done according to standard protocol, a complete blood count every 3 days and a biochemistry panel twice a week." "Thank you, Janet. It's just, 32 years of working with documents at an insurance company has made me a control freak." I smiled guiltily. "You can't cure old age." 74 isn't old, Mrs. Farrell," she winked. "My grandmother is 82, and she still drives and wins bridge tournaments." When Janet left, I took my notebook out of my purse. On the second page, I drew a table with the days of the week and the times of day. I intended to use it to record how I felt in Wilbur's visits. My habit of organizing information hadn't failed me even now. An hour later, Janet brought me a printout of the prescriptions. I studied the list carefully. Broad-spectrum antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, a mucolytic to thin the phlegm, IVs with saline and B vitamins. "Janet, these vitamins my son brought, did Dr. Taggart approve them?" I asked, pointing to the bottle on the nightstand. "No, Mrs. Farrell. The doctor said that with the current treatment, no additional medications are necessary, especially without understanding the ingredients." I nodded and made another note in my notebook. Around noon, Marion Vescott, my neighbor and best friend, came to visit. At 76, she retained a remarkable alertness and strength of character, developed over years of service as a lighthouse keeper. "My goodness, Agatha, you look terrible," she said, instead of a greeting, settling into the visitor's chair. "Hello, Marion." I couldn't help smiling. Her directness always had a sobering effect on me. "No offense, but it's the truth." "You're as pale as a ghost," she said, taking a container out of her large bag. "I brought you some homemade chicken soup. The hospital food isn't fit for a dog." I gratefully accepted her gift. Marion was right. Hospital food was hardly conducive to recovery. "Thank you, you're a true friend. How's everything at home?" "Everything's fine. I check on your house every day and water your flowers." "Oh yes," she frowned. "Your son came by a couple of times. He was taking pictures inside and around the house. He said it was for the insurance company." I felt a chill run down my spine. "For insurance? That's strange. The insurance is paid for a year in advance. Randall took care of everything." Marion shrugged. "That's what I thought. He also asked if I wanted to sell my property. He said he had an investor interested in buying real estate on the waterfront." So that's what it was. Octavia heard correctly. Wilbur was looking for a buyer, but not for the neighbor's house, for our own. "And what did you say?" "I told him I'd sooner wear my hat than sell the house I've lived in all my life," Marion snorted. "After that, he got kind of nervous. He asked how you were feeling and when you'd be discharged. Something's not right here, Agatha." "I think so too," I said, lowering my voice to tell Marion about my suspicions, about Wilbur's conversation with Dr. Taggart, about the unlabeled vitamins, about the strange deterioration in his health after his visits. Marion listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly grim. "You think he—" She didn't finish, but we both understood what she was thinking. "I don't know what to think," I replied honestly. "Maybe I'm being overly suspicious. But Randall warned me about Wilbur before he died, about his interest in the house, and about the fact that he was up to his ears in debt." "Your Randall was always perceptive," Marion nodded. "My nephew Tyler is in the police force. I can ask him to look into your son's financial situation. Unofficially, of course." I hesitated. It was one thing to suspect my own son of dishonest intentions, but quite another to launch an investigation against him. "Let's just keep an eye on things for now," I finally decided. "I'll keep a record. If something is really going on, we'll need proof." After Marion left, I tried to doze off, but thoughts of our conversation kept me awake. Could Wilbur, my own son, really want me dead? It seemed unthinkable, like a bad plot from a detective novel. And yet, all the facts pointed to it. In the evening, Wilbur arrived as usual, with a forced smile and a fashionable briefcase made of expensive leather. "Hi, Mom." He kissed me on the cheek. "You look better today." "I don't feel very well," I lied, watching his reaction. "The doctor says the recovery process is slower than expected." Something like satisfaction flashed across Wilbur's face, but it was quickly replaced by a look of concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you taking the vitamins I brought you?" "No, the doctor didn't recommend them," I replied, looking at him closely. "He said they might interact with the antibiotics." "Nonsense," Wilbur said irritably, but then quickly regained his composure. "I mean, they're just vitamins. They're harmless." "I prefer to follow the doctor's advice," I said firmly. "By the way, Marion stopped by today. She said you were interested in her house." Wilbur visibly tensed up. "Oh, that. Yes, just a friend was asking about real estate on the lake. Nothing serious." "I see. Then why did you take pictures of our house? Is something wrong with the insurance?" No, just I'm planning some renovations for when you get home. I want to make the house more comfortable for you," he said, looking away and fiddling with his shirt cuff. It was a blatant lie. Wilbur had never been interested in renovations, especially for my convenience. "That's sweet of you," I smiled, playing the role of the trusting mother. "How's work? Lots of pests this season?" He waved it off. "Same as usual. Nothing interesting." We chatted a little more about trivial matters. Before leaving, Wilbur insisted that I drink the glass of juice he had brought me. I took a few sips under his watchful gaze, and when he turned away to his briefcase, I discreetly poured the rest into a flower pot on the windowsill. As soon as he left, I took out my notebook and wrote down everything that had happened. I couldn't say for sure yet, but my suspicions were growing stronger by the hour. In the evening, before going to bed, I noticed that the nurse had brought me a new pack of pills. "What's this?" I asked, looking at the unfamiliar yellow capsules. "Dr. Taggart prescribed you a sleeping pill," she replied. "He noticed in your chart that you complained of insomnia." That was strange. I hadn't complained of insomnia. In fact, for the past 2 days, I had finally started sleeping normally at night. "Could you show me the entry in my chart?" I asked. The nurse looked at me doubtfully, but then nodded and showed me her tablet. There was indeed an entry about my sleep problems dated today. The handwriting looked like Dr. Taggart's, but something about it seemed off. "Thank you," I said, "but I feel pretty tired today. I think I'll be able to sleep without the pills." The nurse shrugged and took the capsules. "As you wish. I'll keep them in case you need them." When she left, I opened the notebook again. Did someone tamper with my chart? Wilbur? But how? And why would I need sleeping pills that I didn't ask for? That night, I slept lightly, waking at every sound. In the morning, I felt exhausted, but my mind was clear. After breakfast, I asked the nurse to tell Dr. Taggart that I would like to speak with him privately. Dr. Taggart arrived around 11. He was a tall, thin man with a neat gray beard and attentive eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Farrell," he said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Physically better, but not so good mentally," I said, lowering my voice. "Dr. Taggart, did you prescribe a sleeping pill for me yesterday?" He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "No, you didn't complain about sleeping, and I didn't see any indication for sedatives." I nodded, as if I had expected that answer. "Could you check my chart? There should be a record of the prescription." Dr. Taggart picked up his tablet from the table and scrolled through the records. His face gradually grew more and more sullen. "Indeed, there is a record of a sleeping pill being prescribed," he said slowly, "but I didn't do it." "It looked like your handwriting, but not quite," I said. The doctor looked at me intently. "Mrs. Farrell, do you suspect that someone has tampered with your medical records?" "I don't know what to think," I replied honestly, "but something strange is going on. My son insists that I take some unlabeled vitamins. After his visits, I feel worse. And now this story about the sleeping pills." Dr. Taggart paused, tapping his fingers on his tablet. "These are serious allegations, Mrs. Farrell. We need to be careful. I'll talk to the head nurse and tighten security on your file. And I'd like to take a sample of the vitamins your son brought in." I took the bottle out of the nightstand and handed it to him. "Here you go. And doctor, let's not tell Wilbur about this yet. I may be wrong, and I don't want to accuse my own son without solid evidence." Dr. Taggart nodded. "Of course. I'll check those capsules and let you know the results. In the meantime, I would recommend that you be careful about what you take." After he left, I went back to my notebook. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became. But I needed proof, not just speculation. Octavia came to see me that afternoon. She looked worried and nervous. "Grandma," she began, sitting down on the edge of the bed, "I need to tell you something." "I'm listening, dear." "Last night, I overheard Dad talking on the phone. He was talking to a man about a house on the lake. He said the deal should go through in the next few weeks, as soon as everything is settled with the inheritance." I felt my heart sink. "Are you sure he was talking about our house?" "Yes," Octavia nodded. "He mentioned the address and said something like, 'The old lady has one foot in the grave, so it won't be long now.' Grandma, I'm scared. Was he talking about you?" I squeezed her hand, trying to hide my own fear. "It looks like it, sweetie. But don't worry. Your grandmother will fight back." "What should we do?" Octavia's eyes were filled with tears. "I can't believe that Dad—" "Hush." I pressed my finger to my lips. "We need proof. Can you help me?" She nodded, wiping away her tears. "Of course. What do I need to do?" "Watch your father. If you see or hear anything suspicious, write it down. The date, time, what exactly he said or did. Can you record his conversations on your phone?" "Yes, I have an app for recording calls," Octavia said. "Dad sometimes uses the home phone when he thinks no one's home." "Great. But be careful. Don't take any risks. If he suspects anything, stop immediately." Octavia nodded seriously. I'll be careful. How are you, Grandma? Are you really feeling better? Now that I know what's going on, I'm feeling better, I smiled. You know, your grandfather Randall always said, forewarned is forearmed. After Octavia left, I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The situation was becoming increasingly grim. My own son seemed to be not just waiting for me to die, he was actively trying to hasten my demise, and all for the sake of the house and money. In the evening, Dr. Taggart returned with the results of the vitamin analysis. Mrs. Farrell, he said quietly, closing the door to the ward, I'm afraid your suspicions were not unfounded. The capsules your son brought in contain a dose of sleeping pills that is significantly higher than the therapeutic dose. If you had taken 2 capsules a night, as indicated on the label, the effect would have been unpredictable, especially in combination with your regular medications. I closed my eyes, feeling tears running down my cheeks. It's one thing to suspect, but it's quite another to have it confirmed. What should I do, doctor? By law, I am required to report this to the police, he said. But I wanted to talk to you first. This is your son, and the decision is yours to make. I wiped away my tears and sat up straight. No, we don't need to go to the police yet. We don't have enough evidence to charge him. He could say he bought the vitamins from some shady dealer without knowing what was in them. We need something more substantial. But your safety. Now that I know what to expect, I'll be careful, I assured him. I won't take anything Wilbur gives me, and I'll check all his medications, and I'll keep gathering evidence. Dr. Taggart reluctantly agreed. All right, but I'll keep a close eye on your condition, and if there are any signs of deterioration, I'll take action. That evening, Wilbur didn't come, which was strange. He usually visited me every day. Instead, his wife Paige came. She brought fruit and magazines and was unusually kind and attentive. Too kind. Wilbur asked me to tell you he'll be late from work today, she said, settling into the chair. He has an important meeting with clients. I see, I said, feigning disappointment. I was hoping he would bring me more of those vitamins. They help me. Paige immediately perked up. Oh, he asked me to see if you needed any more. I can bring them tomorrow. That would be wonderful, I smiled. You know, Paige, Wilbur never told me where he buys them. Such effective vitamins must be expensive, right? She hesitated. Well, yes, they're imported. From Switzerland, I think, or Germany. Wilbur orders them online. Another lie. I made a mental note. How are things with you? I asked, changing the subject. Wilbur said you were thinking about moving? Paige raised her eyebrows in surprise. Move? No, I don't know anything about that. That's strange. I thought he mentioned selling the lake house. Paige visibly tensed. Oh, that. Yes, he was discussing some kind of deal with a partner, but I don't get involved in his business. The conversation turned to neutral topics, but I noticed that Paige had become more reserved. When she left, she accidentally left her purse on the chair and returned for it 5 minutes later. During that time, I noticed that she had added something to the water jug on my table. When she left, I called the nurse and asked her to replace the water, saying that I had dropped a pill in it. Then I took out my notebook and wrote down everything that had happened that day. The list of suspicious events and clues grew with each passing hour. The next morning, I woke up with a firm decision. I had to find out what Wilbur was up to and gather enough evidence to stop him. But first, I had to replace the pills he was trying to slip me, and I needed help. Fortunately, I had allies, Octavia, Dr. Taggart, Marion. I wasn't alone in this battle, and I knew for sure that Wilbur had no idea about my investigation. He didn't know that I had heard him talk about a stronger dose. He didn't know that I had figured out his plans to sell the house. And most importantly, he didn't know that I had already replaced the pills he considered his secret weapon. I looked out the window at the gloomy morning sky and thought about Randall. What would he do in my place? Probably the same thing. Gather evidence, wait, prepare for the decisive blow. Randall had always been a strategist, planning several steps ahead, and now I was going to follow his example. Wilbur, son, I thought bitterly, you have no idea who you're dealing with. I survived the Great Recession, buried my husband, and beat breast cancer 10 years ago. If you think a few switched pills are going to stop me, you don't know your mother very well. Finally, the day of my discharge from the hospital arrived. Dr. Taggart still had his doubts, but I insisted. It would be easier to recover at home, and my pneumonia had receded enough that further hospitalization seemed unnecessary. Besides, I needed to get started. Wilbur came to pick me up, radiating care and attention that now seemed as fake as plastic flowers. "Here we are, Mom," he said, helping me into the car. "You'll be home soon. I've got everything ready, fresh linen, groceries, your favorite teas." "Thank you, dear," I smiled, trying not to betray my feelings. "You take such good care of me." On the way home, Wilbur was unusually talkative. He talked about his work, about how Paige had renovated the kitchen, about Octavia's success in school. I listened half-heartedly, noting how carefully he avoided any mention of the house or money. When we pulled up to the house on the lake, I felt a lump in my throat. Our house, a 2-story with a wide porch and a view of the water, stood as it always had, calm and reliable. It had been our refuge for almost 30 years, the place where we had grown old and where Randall had spent his last days. "We're home," Wilbur said, helping me out of the car. "Let me take your things." The house was just as I had left it before I was hospitalized, only cleaner. No doubt Marion had taken care of that. There was a bouquet of wildflowers on the living room table. Her handiwork, too. "I've prepared a room for you downstairs," Wilbur said, pointing to Randall's former study, which had been converted into a bedroom. "You shouldn't go upstairs yet." "Yes, you're right," I agreed, although I would have preferred to be in my bedroom upstairs, away from his watchful eye. "Thank you for your concern." Wilbur put my things away, made tea, and sat down opposite me, watching me drink it. It reminded me of the hospital and his vitamins. "I've made arrangements with my boss," he said. "I'll be working remotely for the next 2 weeks so I can take care of you." 2 weeks? That meant he had a deadline of some sort. Perhaps it had something to do with the mysterious buyer Octavia had mentioned. "You really shouldn't," I protested. "I'm feeling much better already. Besides, Marion promised to stop by every day." "Mom, I insist," he said, his voice taking on a steely tone. "After Dad died, it's my job to take care of you. After Dad died, it's your job to bury me as quickly as possible," I thought, but said aloud, "All right, if it makes you feel better." By evening, I was really tired and went to bed early, not forgetting to lock the door from the inside, a precaution that would have seemed ridiculous in my own home before, but now I didn't feel safe even here. In the morning, when Wilbur left for the pharmacy to get my medicine, I was finally able to look around calmly. First, I checked the safe in our bedroom. It was still there behind the painting and looked untouched. I hadn't changed the code since our wedding day, June 24th, the day Randall and I said "I do." Everything inside was just as I had left it. The house documents, insurance policies, some cash for emergencies, and of course, Randall's will. I took it out and reread it, even though I knew its contents by heart. Randall had left the house to me, and after my death, it was to go to our children in equal shares, Wilbur and Celeste. But there was something else that only I knew about, a codicil to the will that Randall had written a week before his death and left with our family lawyer, Marcus Holt. It stated that if Wilbur tried to contest the will or harm me in any way, his share would go to Octavia. Randall didn't trust his son and had taken steps to protect me. I put all the documents back in the safe, except for the will, a copy of which I hid in my purse. Then I went downstairs and began preparing for the battle ahead. I laid out clean sheets of paper, pens, and a ruler on the kitchen table. I needed to create a system for documenting all of Wilbur's suspicious actions, and I knew how to do it. My years working at an insurance company had not been wasted. I divided one sheet into columns: date, time, events, witnesses, evidence. Then I started filling it in, beginning with Wilbur's conversation with Dr. Taggart at the hospital. Every detail I could remember, every oddity in his behavior, every moment when he lied or left something unsaid. On the second sheet, I made a list of potential clues. The bottle of vitamins, Dr. Taggart had a sample. The entry in the medical record, Wilbur's phone calls about selling the house, the photos he took for the insurance company. On the third sheet, I listed my allies: Octavia, Marion, Dr. Taggart, possibly Fletcher from the pharmacy, and Marcus Holt, the lawyer I planned to visit soon. When I heard the sound of a car approaching, I quickly gathered all the papers and hid them in the pocket of an old robe hanging in the closet, a place where Wilbur would definitely not look. "I'm back, he shouted as he entered the house. "I brought your medicine and some fruit." He put the bag from the pharmacy on the table and began to unpack his purchases. I noticed that among the medicines prescribed by Dr. Taggart was another unlabeled bottle. "What's this?" I asked, pointing to it. "Extra vitamins," Wilbur replied casually. "Fletcher recommended them. He says they'll help you recover faster." Another lie. I was sure that Fletcher, who had known our family for many years, would never recommend questionable, unlabeled medications. "That's very kind of him," I said. "I'll have to thank him when I get into town." Wilbur tensed slightly. "I don't think you should tire yourself with trips anytime soon. I can pass on your thanks." "We'll see how I feel," I replied evasively. Wilbur was by my side all day, attentive and caring. He served tea, offered food, and asked how I was feeling. But I noticed how his gaze sometimes lingered on me with cold calculation, as if he were assessing how much time I had left. In the evening, Marion called and said she would stop by tomorrow. Wilbur grimaced when he heard this, but said nothing. Then Octavia arrived, supposedly to drop off some homework she had missed, but really to check on me. "Grandma," she said, hugging me when Wilbur went out to answer the phone. "Are you okay?" "Yes, sweetie," I whispered, "but I need your help. Can you come over tomorrow after school when your father is at work?" She nodded. "Sure. I'll say I have extra classes and come straight to your place. Be careful and don't tell your mother." Octavia smiled knowingly. "Don't worry, I'm good at keeping secrets." When Wilbur returned, she was already getting ready to leave. "So soon?" he asked with feigned disappointment. "I have a lot of homework," Octavia shrugged, "and my grandmother needs a rest." When she left, Wilbur again insisted that I take the vitamins. "Not now," I said. "My stomach's upset. I'll take them before bed." He frowned but didn't argue. That evening, before going to bed, I flushed the pills down the toilet and locked my bedroom door, placing my phone next to my bed, just in case. In the morning, when Wilbur left for work for a few hours, he couldn't completely abandon his duties, I finally had the opportunity to continue my investigation. First, I called the pharmacy and asked for Fletcher. "Agatha, glad to hear you're home," he said when he got the phone. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you," I replied. "Fletcher, I have an unusual question for you. Did you recommend some vitamins for me to Wilbur, without a label, in a plain bottle?" The pause on the other end of the line spoke louder than any answer. "No," he finally said slowly. "I didn't recommend anything like that. Wilbur asked me for an empty bottle and some labels himself. Said it was for Octavia's school project." Another confirmation. "And he didn't ask you about any strong medications?" I asked cautiously. "Actually, yes." Fletcher's voice became alarmed. "He was interested in sedatives and sleeping pills. He said he had insomnia, but I didn't give him anything without a prescription, of course." "Of course," I echoed. "Thank you, Fletcher." "One more thing. Don't mention our conversation to Wilbur." "No problem. And Agatha, be careful. Call me any time if you need help." After talking to Fletcher, I called my lawyer, Marcus Holt, and arranged a meeting for the next day. Wilbur couldn't find out about it. Then I took my notes out of their hiding place and added the new facts. The list of evidence against Wilbur was growing, but it still seemed insufficient for serious charges. I needed something more concrete, direct proof of his intentions. Marion arrived around noon. She brought homemade pie and the latest news. "My nephew did some digging," she said as we settled on the porch with our tea. "Wilbur is up to his ears in debt, gambling, loans, some shady deals. He needs money fast, and it looks like a lot." "How urgent?" I asked, stirring sugar into my tea. "Very. We've heard he owes some serious people. Not the kind you can work out a payment plan with, if you know what I mean." I knew what she meant. The situation was even worse than I had imagined. Wilbur had backed himself into a corner, and I was his only way out. Or rather, my house and my savings. "What are you going to do?" Marion asked, looking at me intently. "Gather evidence," I replied firmly. "And then I'll corner him. But I need your help." "Of course, anything you need." "Can I borrow your tape recorder? The little one you used to record bird sounds?" Marion nodded. No problem, I'll bring it tomorrow. What are you planning? I want to record Wilbur when he thinks no one is listening. His phone conversations, for example. That's risky, Marion frowned. If he finds out, he won't, I said confidently. I've been working with documents for 32 years, and I know how to hide evidence so that no one can find it. After Marion left, I continued sorting through Randall's papers, which he had kept in his study, now my temporary bedroom. Among them might be some clues, something that would help me understand Wilbur's plans or defend myself against them. In one of the folders, I found some old photographs. Wilbur as a child, a serious boy with a wary look. He had always been a difficult child, withdrawn and manipulative. I remember when he was 8, he broke Randall's favorite vase and blamed it on the cat. And when he was 12, he stole money from my wallet and denied it so convincingly that I almost believed him. Things only got worse in his teenage years. He skipped school, stole small things, and fell in with a bad crowd. Randall tried to channel his energy into something constructive. Sports, clubs, summer jobs. Sometimes it helped, but not for long. At 17, he got into a fight and was arrested, and only Randall's connections saved him from serious consequences. He dropped out of college after his freshman year, saying he wanted to find himself. He got a job as a pest control inspector, married Paige, and Octavia was born. It seemed like he had finally settled down. But then the money problems started, the constant requests for loans, the excuses for why he couldn't pay them back. I sighed as I put the photos away. Where did Randall and I go wrong? What did we do wrong? Celeste grew up to be a normal, responsible person. Why did Wilbur go down a different path? My attention was drawn to an envelope that had fallen out of one of the folders. Inside was a letter from Randall, addressed to me and dated 3 days before his death. I had never seen it before. Dear Agatha, he wrote in his neat handwriting, if you are reading this letter, it means that I am no longer here. I hid it among my papers, knowing that sooner or later you would sort through them. There are things I need to tell you, but I can't bring myself to do it in person. I don't want to cloud our last days together. Randall went on to write that he suspected Wilbur of financial fraud. He had seen his son looking around the house with a stranger when he thought no one was home. He had overheard him talking on the phone about solving his financial problems soon. I've changed my will, Randall continued. Marcus Holt has a document that disinherits Wilbur if he tries to harm you or contest my last will and testament. I'm sorry I didn't tell you this in person. I know how much you love our son, despite all his faults, but my main concern is your safety. Be careful, my darling. Wilbur is dangerous when he's cornered, and that's exactly where he is right now. I reread the letter several times, feeling tears welling up in my throat. Randall knew. He had foreseen what might happen and was trying to protect me even after his death. The sound of a car pulling up brought me back to reality. I quickly hid the letter in my robe pocket and wiped away my tears. Wilbur was back, and I had to continue playing the role of the helpless, trusting mother. Octavia arrived in the evening, as we had agreed. Wilbur was home, but busy talking on the phone on the porch. So we were able to talk alone in the kitchen. I have something for you, Grandma, she whispered, taking a small device out of her backpack. It's a voice-activated mini voice recorder. You can hide it anywhere and it will record when someone starts talking nearby. You're so clever, I hugged her. Where did you get it? I bought it with the money I was saving for a new phone, she shrugged. This is more important. I looked at my granddaughter with pride. At 17, she showed more maturity and responsibility than her father at 45. And there's more, Octavia continued, glancing at the door. I heard Dad talking to a man named Victor. They were discussing deadlines and removing obstacles. Dad said everything would be ready by the end of the month. The end of the month. That meant I had about 3 weeks to gather evidence and stop Wilbur. Thank you, sweetheart. You're a great help. I squeezed her hand. But be careful. Don't take any risks. Don't worry, Grandma. I won't give myself away. She smiled, but her eyes remained serious. I recorded the conversation. The file is on this flash drive. She discreetly handed me a small device. When Wilbur returned from the porch, we were already discussing some school nonsense. He looked at us suspiciously, but noticing nothing unusual, relaxed. What's for dinner? He asked. looking in the refrigerator. "Should we order pizza?" "I already made a casserole," I said. "It's in the oven." The three of us had dinner, making small talk about the weather, Octavia's school, and the latest town news. From the outside, we looked like a normal family spending an evening together. Only Octavia and I knew that it was an illusion, fragile and false, like a theater set. After dinner, when Octavia had left for home, Wilbur again insisted that I take my vitamins. "You need to regain your strength, Mom," he said with feigned concern. "These vitamins are specially formulated for elderly people after an illness." "All right," I said, taking the bottle. "I'll take them before bed." He watched me put it on the bedside table and nodded, satisfied. When he left, I hid the tape recorder Octavia had given me under the same table, where it would be able to record any conversations in the room. Before going to sleep, I thought long and hard about Randall's letter, Octavia's tape recorder, and my upcoming meeting with the lawyer. My suspicions were confirmed one by one, forming a grim picture. Wilbur didn't just want my house, he was willing to get rid of me to get it. "Papers don't burn," Randall liked to say, meaning that documents always preserve the truth, even when people try to hide it. Now those words took on new meaning. Documents, records, evidence. They would be my weapons in the fight against my own son. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Fragments of memories swirled in my head. Wilbur as a child, his first bike, his high school graduation, Octavia's birth. Moments when I believed that everything would be fine, that my son would grow up to be a decent man. What had brought him to this point? When had greed blinded him to his humanity? And would I, his mother, be able to stop him before he did something irreparable? With these thoughts, I finally fell asleep, clutching Randall's letter tightly in my hand. The last gift from my husband, which might save my life. My meeting with attorney Marcus Holt went exactly as I had expected. The gray-haired man with a penetrating gaze listened attentively to my concerns without interrupting, only occasionally making notes in his notebook. "So, Randall was right," he said thoughtfully when I finished my story. He foresaw that Wilbur might resort to extreme measures. "Did you know about his suspicions?" I asked. "Of course. Randall came to see me shortly before he died. He was very concerned. He said that Wilbur was up to his ears in debt and looking for quick ways to solve his problems." Marcus took a folder out of his desk drawer. "Here is the codicil to the will, which you already know about, but there's something else." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Randall left this in case his fears were confirmed. It contains evidence of Wilbur's financial shenanigans. Your husband conducted his own investigation and discovered that Wilbur used forged documents to take out a loan in your name." I stared at the envelope in shock. "But we never took out a loan on this house. It's paid off in full." "Exactly. Wilbur forged your signatures on the documents. Randall discovered this by accident when he was sorting through the mail and found a letter from the bank thanking him for opening a new line of credit." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were copies of the loan agreement with my supposed signature, bank statements showing large withdrawals, and Randall's handwritten notes about the results of his investigation. "My God," I muttered. "So there's a loan on the house that I didn't even know about?" "Yes, for $250,000, Marcus nodded. "Randall managed to contact the bank and explain the situation. They started an internal investigation but didn't manage to complete it before your husband died. Then the case somehow stalled. And now Wilbur wants to sell the house before I find out about the loan," I guessed, "to pay off the debt to the bank with the money from the sale and keep the rest for himself." "Probably. And judging by what you've told me about his attempts to speed up your departure, he's in a hurry." I clutched the folder with the documents. "What should I do, Marcus?" "Legally speaking, we have enough evidence to charge him with fraud. Forging a signature on a loan agreement is a serious crime, but you need proof of his intentions toward you personally. Records, witnesses, evidence." "I'm working on it," I nodded. "Octavia is helping me. We already have some recordings of his conversations." "Good. Keep gathering evidence, but be extremely careful." Marcus looked at me with concern. "Agatha, if you feel you are in immediate danger, contact the police immediately. No evidence is worth your life." When I got home, I hid the documents Marcus had given me in a hiding place I had made behind a loose board in the closet. Wilbur was at work and wouldn't be home until evening, so I had time to think about my next steps. I took out my notebook and added the new information about the loan. The picture was becoming clearer. Wilbur didn't just want to take possession of the house after my death. He had already mortgaged it using forged documents. Now he needed to sell the property quickly to pay off his debts and the bank before the deception was discovered. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Standing on the doorstep was Celeste, my daughter, whom I hadn't seen since I was discharged from the hospital. "Mom," she hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I've been swamped with work." Celeste looked tired. At 40, she looked older. Fine lines around her eyes, gray strands in her dark hair. Her job as a vending machine repairwoman required constant travel, and I rarely saw my daughter more than once a month. "Come in, dear," I said, leading her into the living room. "Tea, coffee?" "Tea, please." She sat down on the sofa, nervously fiddling with the strap of her watch, a habit she had had since childhood. "Mom, I need to talk to you about Wilbur." I froze. What happened? "He came to see me yesterday. He asked me to sign some papers about the house. He said you wanted to sell it while real estate prices were high, and that he needed the signatures of all the heirs." "And you signed?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "No." Celeste shook her head. "Something seems strange to me. Why didn't you call me yourself? Why was it so urgent? I told him I'd think about it and get back to you directly." I breathed a sigh of relief. "You did the right thing. I'm not going to sell the house, Celeste. It's all Wilbur's doing. I told my daughter everything. About the conversation I overheard at the hospital, about the vitamins with sleeping pills, about the fake loan and Wilbur's plans to sell the house to pay off his debts." Celeste listened, her face growing darker and darker. "My God, Mom," she whispered when I finished. "You think he really could?" She didn't finish, but we both knew what she meant. "I don't know what he's capable of when he's cornered," I replied honestly, "but the facts speak for themselves. He tried to give me sleeping pills in dangerous doses. After his visits to the hospital, I felt worse. And now this story about the house sale documents. "We need to go to the police," Celeste said decisively. "We don't have enough evidence yet," I objected. "His lawyer could say it's all a misunderstanding, that he really believed I wanted to sell the house, that he bought the vitamins from a shady seller without knowing what they were. We need irrefutable proof." "And how are you going to get that?" "I have a plan." I lowered my voice, even though no one else was home. "I'm going to fake an illness. Make Wilbur think his plan is working and that I'm really taking his medicine. He'll let his guard down and might slip up. Octavia is recording his conversations." Celeste shook her head. "That's dangerous, Mom. What if he decides to force the issue?" "Dr. Taggart knows about it. He'll check on me every 2 days, and Marion comes by every day." I squeezed my daughter's hand. "I'll be careful, I promise." We talked for another hour. Celeste agreed to help. She was to pretend to consider Wilbur's offer to sell the house to lull him into a false sense of security. We agreed to stay in constant contact and call each other immediately if anything went wrong. When Celeste left, I began preparing for Wilbur's arrival. I put the soup on the stove and took yesterday's leftover casserole out of the refrigerator. Then I dusted my face with powder to make myself look paler and tousled my hair. When I heard his car pull up, I lay down on the sofa and covered myself with a blanket, pretending to be weak. "Mom?" Wilbur entered the living room. "What's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" "Just a little tired," I replied in a weak voice. "My head has been spinning all day." He sat down next to me, and a strange expression appeared on his face, a mixture of concern and satisfaction. "Are you taking the vitamins I gave you?" "Yes, every night," I lied. "Maybe they're too strong for me?" No, it's just a coincidence," he said hastily. "You're probably just overtired. Get some rest. I'll make dinner." At dinner, Wilbur was unusually talkative and even suggested calling Dr. Taggart. I refused, saying that I was feeling better. But in the evening, I pretended to be weak and dizzy again. "Mom, I'm worried," Wilbur said with feigned concern. "Maybe you should go back to the hospital." "No, it's not necessary," I shook my head. "It's just my age. Help me get to the bedroom, please." He took my arm, and I could feel his muscles tense, as if he were struggling to contain his impatience. "By the way," he said casually as I was lying in bed, I was talking to the real estate agent the other day. You know, property prices by the lake are very high right now. Maybe you should think about selling the house. It's too big for you on your own, and it's expensive to maintain. Sell the house? I feigned surprise. But your father and I spent so many years fixing it up. All the memories. Of course, I understand, he said hastily. But from a practical point of view, it makes sense. You could buy something smaller, closer to the city, and put the rest of the money in a savings account, a secure retirement, health insurance. I don't know, Wilbur, I said, pretending to think it over. It's a big decision. I need time to think it through. Of course, Mom, he smiled, his impatience barely concealed. Get some rest. We can talk about it again when you're feeling better. When the door closed behind him, I quietly got out of bed and turned on the tape recorder hidden under the bedside table. Then I listened. Wilbur was talking on the phone in the hallway, thinking I was already asleep. Yes, she's considering selling, he said in a hushed voice. No, she hasn't agreed yet, but it's only a matter of time. Yes, she's in bad shape, can barely walk. Don't worry, Victor. Everything will be settled by the end of the month. You'll get your money. Yes, I already took an advance. It'll be enough to pay off the most urgent debts. No, my sister won't be a problem. She'll sign. All right, let's talk later. I went back to bed, feeling my heart pounding with excitement. Wilbur had already taken an advance on a house that didn't belong to him. How deep was he in debt? And who was this Victor he was so desperate to pay back? In the morning, I continued to play the role of a weak and sick woman. I could barely move around the house, often sitting down to rest, speaking in a quiet, tired voice. Wilbur watched me with poorly concealed impatience. Maybe you should see a doctor, he suggested at breakfast. Don't bother Taggart, I replied. He's coming to see me the day after tomorrow anyway. I just need to rest more. And don't forget to take your vitamins, Wilbur reminded me. They should help you recover. Of course, dear, I smiled weakly. You take such good care of me. After breakfast, he left for work, and I immediately contacted Dr. Taggart. I told him about my plan and my new suspicions. That's very risky, Mrs. Farrell, the doctor said with concern. If he's really trying to poison you, I'm not taking anything he gives me, I assured him. I'm just pretending. I need him to slip up so we can get proof. All right, but I'll come check on you today, not the day after tomorrow, Dr. Taggart said firmly. And if I notice any real signs of deterioration, I'll have you hospitalized immediately, despite your protests. After talking to the doctor, I called Marion and asked her to come over. I needed help finding documents confirming that Wilbur had already found a buyer for the house and taken a down payment. Marion arrived half an hour later, and we began a careful search. We checked the study where Wilbur sometimes worked and looked through the papers he left in his room. Nothing. Then Marion suggested checking his car. He was always messy, she said. I remember Randall complaining that Wilbur turned his car into a mobile trash can. Wilbur's car was in the garage when he left for work in the company pickup truck. We carefully opened the door and began to look around the interior. In the glove compartment, we found some papers, receipts, and instructions. And under the passenger seat was an envelope with the logo of the real estate company, Lakeside Realty. Inside was a preliminary contract for the sale of a house with the address of our lake cottage. The buyer was listed as Victor Investments, and the sellers were me, Wilbur, and Celeste. My signature, of course, was forged. The transaction amount was $800,000, with a down payment of $150,000. A note indicated that the full amount would be paid after all necessary documents were provided, including the signed consent of all owners. Here it is, I whispered, showing the document to Marion. Proof that he's already selling the house behind my back. And he forged your signature, Marion pointed out. That's enough to charge him with fraud. We took a photo of the document on Marion's phone and put it back where we found it. Then we carefully locked the car and returned to the house. What now? Marion asked. Now we have to wait for Wilbur to give himself away, I replied. We have proof of fraud, but we also need proof of his intentions toward me. Dr. Taggart arrived in the afternoon. He examined me thoroughly, took my blood pressure and pulse, and checked my lungs. You're physically fine, he concluded, but I'm still worried. This plan is too dangerous. I have no choice, doctor, I sighed. If I go to the police now with only evidence of fraud, Wilbur may get off with a suspended sentence or a fine. And then what? He'll still be my son. He'll still have access to me. I want him stopped once and for all." Dr. Taggart shook his head but did not argue. "I'll come by every day," he said, "and at the slightest sign of a real deterioration in your condition, I'll have you hospitalized immediately." Wilbur returned in the evening. He looked agitated and irritated at the same time. "Celeste called," he said, throwing his keys on the table in the hall. "She says you're not feeling well." "I'm just tired," I replied, sitting in an armchair with a blanket over my knees. "Dr. Taggart came by and said it's normal after pneumonia." "Taggart was here?" Wilbur frowned. "Why? We agreed he'd come the day after tomorrow." "I called him," Marion interjected, still standing next to me. "Agatha looked really bad this morning. I was worried." Wilbur shot Marion a disapproving look. "Thanks for your concern, but I can take care of my mother myself." "I'm sure you can," Marion replied dryly, "but an extra pair of eyes wouldn't hurt." After dinner, Marion left, and Wilbur and I were alone. I continued to feign weakness and illness. "Have you thought about what I said?" he asked, helping me to the bedroom. "About selling the house?" "I have." I nodded slowly. "You know, maybe you're right. The house is too big for me, and it's getting harder to maintain." Wilbur's eyes lit up with greed. "Really? Do you really think so?" "Yes." I paused. "But we need to discuss it with Celeste, and with a lawyer. Everything has to be done legally." "Of course, Mom," he agreed hastily. "I already talked to Celeste. She's fine with it. And as for a lawyer, I can take care of that." "I have a friend who specializes in real estate transactions." "No," I said firmly. "I want Marcus Holt to handle it. He handled all of Randall's affairs and knows our situation." Wilbur grimaced but quickly regained his composure. "As you say, the main thing is that you agree with the idea of selling. It's the right decision, Mom. You'll be able to buy an apartment closer to us and Paige, and we'll see each other often." "Yes, especially if I'm lying in a cemetery," I thought, but I smiled and nodded. "Sounds tempting." "Let's talk about this tomorrow. I'm very tired." "Of course, get some rest." He helped me lie down and covered me with a blanket. "Don't forget to take your vitamins before bed." "I won't forget," I promised. When he left, I took the bag of pills I'd been collecting from under my pillow, pretending to take Wilbur's vitamins. Tomorrow, I would give them to Dr. Taggart for analysis, more evidence. I was awakened by a noise in the middle of the night. Someone was walking around the house, and it was clearly not Wilbur. The footsteps were too light. I peeked out of my bedroom and saw a shadow glide into the living room. My heart raced. A burglar? But why hadn't the alarm gone off? I quietly followed the shadow and breathed a sigh of relief when I recognized Octavia. She was standing by the bookcase looking for something. "Octavia?" I whispered. "What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" She started and turned around. "Grandma, you scared me." She pressed her hand to her chest. I wanted to set up another voice recorder in Dad's study. He's always on the phone in there." "How did you get in?" "I have a spare key," she explained. "Dad doesn't know about it. I made a copy last year when I accidentally locked myself out and no one was home." I smiled. My granddaughter was not only smart, but also thoughtful. "Good idea with the voice recorder, but be careful if your father catches you." "He won't," Octavia said confidently. "He's sleeping like a log, and he snores so loud you can hear him from the other end of the house." Together, we set up the voice recorder in the study, hiding it behind a stack of books on the shelf. Then I told Octavia about the latest developments, about finding the sales contract, about my fake illness, about my conversation with Wilbur about selling the house. "Does he really think you'll agree to sell the house?" Octavia asked in surprise. "He thinks his vitamins are working and that I'm getting weaker and more suggestible," I explained. "Besides, he has no choice. He needs the money urgently." "I heard him talking to some guy named Victor," Octavia said. "It sounded scary. This Victor was threatening him. I think Wilbur owes him a lot of money, and now he's trying to get out of it by selling our house." Octavia shook her head. "I can't believe my own father. It's like a bad dream." I hugged my granddaughter. "I know, sweetie. It's hard for me, too. But we have to stop him before he does something irreparable. We talked a little more, and Octavia left as quietly as she had come. I went back to bed, but sleep would not come. My thoughts revolved around Wilbur, his debts, his desperate attempts to solve his problems at my expense. What had turned my son into a man willing to kill his own mother for money? In the morning, Wilbur seemed unusually cheerful. He made breakfast, brought me tea in bed, and was attentive and caring. Too caring. "I spoke with the real estate agent," he said casually. "There's a potential buyer who's very interested in the house. He's offering a good price." "Really? How much?" I tried to make my voice sound indifferent. $800,000. That's above market value." "Sounds tempting," I nodded. "Who's the buyer?" "A company that wants to develop tourism on the lake. They want to build a small hotel or campground here." Another lie. I knew from the contract that the company was called Victor Investments and most likely belonged to the same Victor to whom Wilbur owed money. "Interesting," I said. "What about Marion's house? Do they want to buy that too?" Wilbur hesitated for a moment. "Not yet, but maybe in the future. Right now, they're only interested in our property because it has the best access to the water." I pretended to think about it, sipping my tea. I noticed how impatiently Wilbur was drumming his fingers on the table, waiting for my answer. "Well, let's discuss it with Celeste," I finally said. "And with Marcus Holt. If the price is really good." "Great!" Wilbur couldn't hide his relief. "I'll call Celeste tonight. She promised to stop by this evening." When he left for work, I immediately called Dr. Taggart and told him about the latest developments. He was concerned but agreed with my plan to wait for Celeste's visit that evening and then decide together how to proceed. The day dragged on slowly. I continued to feign weakness when Wilbur called to check on me, but as soon as the conversation ended, I got to work, organizing the evidence I had gathered, taking notes, and preparing for the evening meeting. Around 4 o'clock, Marion called. "Agatha, my nephew found out something about this Victor," she said without preamble. "Victor Kravitz, owner of an underground casino in Lone Shark. Wilbur owes him about $300,000, and Kravitz isn't the type to forgive debts." "My God," I muttered. "So that's why Wilbur is in such a hurry to sell the house." "Exactly, and judging by everything, the debt is due at the end of the month. After that—" Marion fell silent. "After that, Kravitz will take action," I finished for her, "and Wilbur knows it. That's why he's so desperate to get me out of here and sell the house. You need to be very careful, Agatha. Kravitz's people could show up at any moment. Don't worry, Celeste and Dr. Taggart are coming tonight. We'll decide what to do next." After talking to Marion, I felt a sense of unease growing. The situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Wilbur was backed into a corner, and now not only my life was in danger, but his as well. And a desperate man is capable of the most reckless acts. Celeste was the first to arrive that evening. She looked agitated and tense. "Wilbur called me 3 times today," she said as she walked into the living room. "He insisted that I agree to sell the house. He said you had already made up your mind, and all that was left was to settle the formalities." "He's in a hurry." I nodded. "And now we know why. He owes a large sum of money to a man named Victor Kravitz, the owner of an underground casino. The debt is due at the end of the month." Celeste paled. "And what will happen if he doesn't pay the debt?" "Nothing good," I replied grimly. "People like Kravitz don't forgive debtors. We discussed the situation and decided that Celeste would pretend to agree to sell the house, but would stall for time, requesting additional consultations and checks. Dr. Taggart arrived shortly thereafter. He examined me and confirmed that I was physically fine, but expressed serious concern about my plan. "It's too risky," he said. "If Wilbur is really desperate, he may resort to extreme measures." "That's why we need to act quickly," I replied. "We have evidence of fraud, forgery, and possibly even attempted poisoning, but we need to catch him red-handed so that there is no doubt." We agreed that tomorrow I would stage a serious deterioration in my health. Dr. Taggart will come for an examination, and Celeste and I will provoke Wilbur into a frank conversation about his plans, recording everything on a voice recorder. When the doctor left, Celeste and I continued to discuss the details of the plan. Suddenly, we heard the sound of a car approaching. "Wilbur is back early," I said anxiously, looking out the window, "but that's not his car." A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the house. 2 men in dark suits got out and headed for the front door. "Who are they?" Celeste asked fearfully. "I don't know, but I have a bad feeling about this," I said, quickly walking into the hallway. "Stay here." I opened the door before the strangers could ring the bell. Standing in front of me was a tall man with cold gray eyes and thin lips pressed into a tight line. "Mrs. Farrell?" he asked in an unpleasant, squeaky voice. "I'm Victor Kravitz. I need to talk to your son." I felt a chill run down my spine. "He's not home," I replied, trying to sound calm. "He's at work." "I don't think so." Kravitz smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "His car just turned into the driveway." I turned around and saw the headlights of Wilbur's car approaching the house. "Mom, what's going on?" Celeste appeared in the hallway. "Everything's fine, honey," I tried to smile. "These gentlemen are looking for Wilbur. He just got home." Wilbur's car pulled up and he got out, holding a bag from the supermarket. When he saw Kravitz, he froze, and even from a distance I could see his face turn pale. "Victor," he said, slowly approaching the porch. "What are you doing here?" "Decided to pay your mother a visit," Kravitz grinned, "to meet the man whose house you so generously offered as collateral." Wilbur glanced at me quickly, looking frightened. "Let's talk somewhere else," he suggested, looking around nervously. "This isn't a good time." "On the contrary," Kravitz replied, "it's the perfect time. I want to make sure your mother really intends to sell the house and that the deal will go through on time. I'll explain everything." Wilbur took a step toward Kravitz. "Just not here, not now." "Come in, Mr. Kravitz," I said, surprising everyone. "I think we really should talk, since it's about my house." Kravitz raised his eyebrows in surprise but nodded and entered the house with his silent companion. Wilbur looked as if he was about to faint. "Mom, you don't need to worry," he began when we were all settled in the living room. "It's just a business conversation." "About selling my house, which you used as collateral without my knowledge?" I asked, looking him straight in the eye. "Yes, I definitely need to know about that." Wilbur looked helplessly at Kravitz, but he just shrugged. "It seems your mother isn't aware of your plans, Wilbur," he remarked with a cold smile. "And you said she agreed to the sale." "She is!" Wilbur exclaimed hastily. "She just needs time to get used to the idea, right, Mom?" He looked at me imploringly. "We discussed it this morning. You said you were willing to consider the offer." I nodded slowly. "Yes, we did talk about it, but you didn't mention that you'd already taken an advance and used the house as collateral for some of your debts." Kravitz laughed. "What a twist." He turned to Wilbur. "You promised me $800,000 by the end of the month. You said your mother had already agreed to sell the house and that everything was settled." "That's right." Wilbur's voice became desperate. "Mom, please don't do this. You don't understand what's at stake." "Oh, I understand perfectly well," I said firmly. "You owe Mr. Kravitz a large sum of money, and now you're trying to pay him off with my house. You even went so far as to forge my signature on the documents and tried to expedite my consent in various ways." Celeste, standing by the window, gasped quietly. Kravitz shifted his gaze from me to Wilbur, clearly enjoying the situation. "Mom, please," Wilbur practically begged. "I'll explain everything, but not now. Just tell Mr. Kravitz that you agree to sell the house and everything will be fine." "And if I don't agree?" I asked, looking at Kravitz. "Then what?" "Then your son will be in serious trouble," he replied calmly. "Very serious trouble." "I see." I paused. "Mr. Kravitz, may I ask you a question? Did you know that the house belonged to me and not to Wilbur when you gave him the money?" Kravitz shrugged. "He said he inherited the house after his father died. He showed me some documents. I didn't check their authenticity. It's not my problem." "So, he lied to you too?" I shook my head. "My husband died just a year ago, and the house belongs entirely to me. Wilbur has no claim to it except for a possible inheritance in the future." Kravitz's face darkened. "Is that true, Farrell?" Wilbur looked as if he had been backed into a corner. I was going to take care of everything. Mom will agree to sell the house and you'll get your money. We just need a little time." "You don't have time," Kravitz snapped. "The deadline is in 10 days. Either the money or—" He didn't finish his sentence, but his gaze spoke volumes. At that moment, the doorbell rang. We all jumped, and Wilbur literally jumped up in place. "I'll get it," Celeste said and went into the hallway. A few seconds later, she returned, accompanied by Dr. Taggart and 2 police officers. "What's going on?" Kravitz demanded, rising from his chair. "The police?" Wilbur exclaimed at the same time. "Mom, what have you done?" "What I should have done a long time ago," I replied. "Officers, this man, my son, tried to poison me to hasten my death and take over the house. We have proof." One of the officers stepped forward. "Wilbur Farrell, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder, fraud, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent." Wilbur looked at me with an expression of utter shock and betrayal. "Mom, how could you? I'm your son." "The son who tried to kill me for money," I replied quietly. "I'm sorry, Wilbur, but I had to stop you." As the police officers handcuffed him, Kravitz suddenly laughed. "Well, Farrell, it looks like your mother was smarter than you. If I were you, I wouldn't worry about the debt, but about how many years you'll spend behind bars." The second officer turned to Kravitz. "Victor Kravitz, we have a warrant for your arrest. You're charged with illegal gambling, loan sharking, and extortion." The smile disappeared from Kravitz's face. He glanced quickly at his companion, who was already slowly backing toward the door, but was stopped by a third police officer who had entered the house. "This is a misunderstanding," Kravitz began. "I'm a law-abiding businessman." "You can tell that to the police," the officer interrupted him. When the police led Wilbur and Kravitz away, silence fell in the house. I sank into a chair, suddenly feeling empty. Celeste sat down next to me and put her arms around my shoulders. "It's over, Mom," she said quietly. "You're safe." "I know." I squeezed her hand. "But at what cost? My own son." Dr. Taggart checked my blood pressure and pulse. "You need to rest, Mrs. Farrell. The last few days have been very stressful." I nodded, feeling exhausted. It was truly over. Wilbur had been arrested and would be held accountable for his actions. The house was mine. I was safe. But I felt no joy, only bitterness at the betrayal and pain at the thought that my own son had been willing to do such a thing for money. What had brought him to this point? Where did Randall and I go wrong in raising him? "Now you need to think about the future," Celeste said, as if reading my mind. "About yourself, about Octavia and me. Wilbur made his choice, and now he has to live with the consequences." I knew she was right. Life goes on, even after betrayals like this. And I still had my family. Celeste, Octavia, friends who supported me in my time of need. "Yes," I smiled weakly. "You're right. Tomorrow is a new day." Twilight was gathering outside, and the reflection of the lake was growing darker. The house that Wilbur had wanted so desperately stood as strong and reliable as ever, a keeper of my memories and a witness to my family's tragedy. But even in that bitter moment, I knew I could go on, as I always had, with the dignity and fortitude that Randall had valued so much in me.